Folks, this right here is exactly what Practicality looks like. It's the 2022 Kia Carnival, and behind that futuristic mug is one of the most useful vehicles on the market today. For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that. Look, I don't think you're as naive as Kia does, so I'm gonna give it to you straight. This isn't a life utility vehicle, it is a minivan. If I were rolling around on a four-wheel personal transportation device, that wouldn't change the fact I was talking about a skateboard. So let's call this what it is, a van. But that gives it some serious advantages over a three-row SUV, starting with these massive sliding doors on either side that are power opening and closing on all but the base trim. And the openings, they just make it so easy to climb inside, and that includes when you have to load little ones into car seats, or if you want to access the third row. It's easier than it is in a massive three-row SUV like the Chevy Suburban. And that's handy if you're shuttling some extra kids to soccer practice or the in-laws are in town. And then around back, you just can't argue with all the cargo room you get. There's 1,140 liters back here, and this well is super deep since that's where the third row seats go when you're not using them. And when you're not, you have more than double the cargo space. And whether you're talking about back here or the sides, the Carnival is nice and low to the ground, which means it's not awkward and uncomfortable to get inside. Doesn't matter what age or mobility. And then if you want to pull those second row seats out, you can actually do it here in all but the top trim, which isn't something you can usually do with a van these days, and you get more cargo room than the Suburban when you do. I just can't get over how practical this thing is. All that stuff's the big sell for me of why minivans make more sense for families than SUVs, but that's not all this thing has going for it. Just take a look at the pricing. The Carnival starts right around $37,000 before tax, and it maxes out around $50,500, and that means it's thousands of dollars less than comparable versions of both the Kia Telluride and the Volkswagen Atlas, two of the biggest three-row SUVs you can get this side of big truck-based ones. Now, the downside here is you can't get all-wheel drive with the Carnival, and you can get it with a couple other minivans out there, as well as every other SUV, and all-wheel drive is standard on those two I just mentioned. But honestly, I don't think it's that big of a deal, especially because it doesn't mean you can skip winter tires, and those matter way more. Now, power in this thing comes from a 3.5 liter V6, and there is plenty of it. Officially, it makes 290 horsepower and 262 pound-feet of torque, so right in the same neighborhood as both of those SUVs. It's a naturally aspirated V6, and it is really smooth and strong. It might just surprise you. Now, this 8-speed automatic transmission definitely helps with that vibe of overall smoothness, and shifts are barely perceptible as you're cruising around, and there's a nice and steady way to how this thing accelerates. It definitely doesn't feel like it weighs 4,600 pounds. When you get on the gas, it's not bad for what it is. My only issue with this powertrain is it is pretty outdated and inefficient compared to some others on the market, including that Sienna that's hybrid only these days. There's not even an ignition stop-start system that cuts emissions when you come to a light because it'll turn the engine off. That's a bit of a disappointment. And then there's the fuel economy. Back when I tested that Sienna, and you've already watched that review, if not, we're gonna go ahead and throw a link up there. But when I reviewed that thing, I averaged 6.5 liters per 100 kilometers or so, and that was in the dead of winter. This thing, so far, I'm averaging right around 10 liters per 100 kilometers, which is right in the ballpark of what it's rated for, but obviously it's nowhere near as good. And then you also have the Chrysler Pacifica that's available as a plug-in hybrid. So this thing is definitely pretty dated in terms of the powertrain, but it hits back with a drive that's nicer than just about any other minivan on the market. And no, I don't think you're looking for something sporty in a minivan, although that would be kind of cool. But it is nice that it's just kind of crisp, and responsive. The steering especially, it's impossibly light for such a big vehicle, but the response is sharp and it's very quick, and that helps out if you need to make an evasive maneuver in an emergency situation. And then the ride quality is pretty good most of the time too. Though, it does have a multi-link suspension in the back instead of a torsion beam, but it feels like it's the other way around sometimes. I'm talking about city speeds. It's a little clunky over rough roads and potholes. And it's not necessarily that it's uncomfortable, it's just in such contrast with the way this thing behaves out on the highway. It is so smooth when it's cruising around. So the way it is around town is just different, and that's what stands out. And now, speaking of the highway, this one I'm driving is the EX Plus, so one trim from the top, and that means it's loaded with all the bells and whistles you need to make highway driving as stress-free as possible. It's got lane keep assist and lane following, both of which are standard. And then it's also got adaptive cruise control that works in stop and go traffic. And it also uses navigation data, so it'll slow down for curves in the road. It's pretty cool. My only issue is that lane following system. It's just not very smooth. You can feel it constantly making little micro corrections. You can even see the steering wheel moving when it happens. And if you take a look at a similar system from Nissan, it is way more refined, and this could really benefit from something similar. But the good news is, if you don't want to use it, you don't have to, and you can still have lane keep assist. And that's usually not the case. It's not often you get both of those. It's usually one combined system. So I do like that. And you don't even have to use lane keep assist or lane following, and you can still use the adaptive cruise control. So I like that Kia does give you that choice. And there's a bunch of other advanced safety features here too, like blind spot monitoring that gives you a live look at either side of the van when you use your turn signal. Rumor has it that BMW was gonna introduce a similar system, but its drivers don't use their signals, so it decided against it. Just kidding, of course. But anyways, there's a lot of other good stuff here too, like surround view monitoring, as well as a cool forward collision warning system that will even warn you if you're about to turn left into oncoming traffic. Those unnerving moments where you're sitting in an intersection, you're waiting to turn left, and there's a big truck across from you, and you can't tell if there's anything coming towards you? Yeah, this will warn you if you're about to turn into oncoming traffic, and that is really cool. I love a feature like that. And then overall, there's a ton of good stuff considering this isn't quite fully loaded. So there is some stuff you're missing. You don't get ventilated seats. There's no sunroof, though I'm fine with that because there is a ton of headroom as a result. But there's lots of other good features here. You get this massive 12.3-inch touchscreen. It's got built-in nav, satellite radio, Apple CarPlay, and Android Auto. And there's some other cool family-friendly features here too, like a microphone that will project your voice over the speakers in the back so you can talk to the kids. And there's this other cool feature. It's a camera that gives you a live look at the back seat right here on the infotainment screen. I absolutely love that because it means if you're cruising around by yourself and you want to know what the kids in the back are doing, you can just pull it up here without turning your head or asking the person next to you to check out what's going on. It's very neat the way that works. And then overall, there's lots of good stuff going on here, starting with the basic way that the system works. But I also really like that Kia gives you these shortcut buttons. There's one here down on the center stack and one on the wheel, and you can program them to pull up your favorite features. So I have that camera in the back programmed with the button on the steering wheel, and then I have my Apple CarPlay with this shortcut button down here. That means you don't have to dive through the menus to find what you want to do. I love that, and overall it works really well, though I'm not so crazy about these haptic touch buttons you get here in this EX Plus as well as the SX instead of physical buttons. You do get some physical controls. You get knobs for volume and tune, as well as these rockers for temperature, and even the front and rear defrost are physical buttons, but the rest of them, they're just not great, mostly for the looks. They attract dust and the oils from your fingers. They're just kind of gross. Again, everything else is really nice, but this to me isn't so great. But regardless, you do have a nice sense of command and control from this driver's seat. You definitely feel like the captain of the ship, and outward visibility is fantastic. Now, this thing is really tall and upright, which means a bit of body roll, but what do you expect? It's a van. But that means the windows are huge, so you get that great view no matter which direction you're looking, except for the rear three-quarter view. The headrest in the back, yeah, it blocks it from the driver's seat, but that's why the blind spot monitoring system comes in handy. But again, the important stuff here is all the family-friendly features, right down to the buttons here on the side of this passenger seat, so you can move it from the driver's seat. And that means if you're a solo parent out on a road trip with the kids, you don't have to walk around to the other side of the van to use the buttons down on the side of the chair to give a kid in the back more legroom. You can do it from right here, and that is super cool. And there's even a button here by my left knee so I can disable the power doors if I don't want the kids to be able to open them. I love that. You know, I like how clever all the touches here. Whether it's cool or not is up to you, but there's no denying how useful this Carnival is. To recap, I like all the family-friendly features in the Kia Carnival, how roomy it is, and the silky smooth powertrain. I don't like the touch controls for the HVAC and infotainment system, that all-wheel drive isn't available, or that the lane following system isn't all that smooth. Look, I can't force you to buy a minivan, but since you've made it this far, I'm assuming it's because you might actually consider one. And if that's the case, there is a lot to like about this new Carnival. But then if you look at the Kia lineup, there's a lot to like about both the Telluride and the smaller Sorento. So here's my advice. Head to your local dealer and check them all out. Drive them back to back and dig around inside. And if you keep an open mind, I think you might just like what you find here.